Welcome back. What we're going to do is we're going to read The Farm That Ran Away and Came Back. Right? Take a look at these directions up here. Read the passage about a farmer in the Netherlands where farmland has been recaptured from swampland. Then answer questions 1 through 8. Well, let's take a look. The Farm That Ran Away and Came Back by William Elliott Griffiths. Oh, let's zoom in. Let's get fancy. Oh, yeah. All right. Please use your card to follow along as I read, please, line for line. There was once a Dutchman who lived in a province called Drenthe. Because there was a row of little trees on his farm, his name was Rijer van Boompjes, that is, Rijer of the Little Trees. After a while, he moved to the shore of the Zuiderzee and into Overijssel. Overijssel means over the Giesel River. There, he bought a new farm near the village of Blokzl. By diking and pumping, certain wise men had changed 10 acres of sand and heath into pasture and land for plowing. They surrounded it on 3 sides with canals. The fourth side fronted on the Zuiderzee. Then they advertised in glowing language the merits of the new land, and Rijer van Boompjes bought it and paid for his real estate. He was as proud as a popinjay of his island, and he ruled over it like a czar or a kaiser. A few years before, Rijer had married. At this date, when our story begins, he had 4 blooming but old-fashioned children who had good appetites. They could eat cabbage and potatoes, rye bread and cheese by the half-peck, and drink buttermilk by the quart. In addition, Rijer owned 4 horses, 6 cows, 2 dogs, some roosters and hens, a flock of geese, 2 dozen ducks, and a donkey. Yet although Rijer was rich, as wealth is reckoned in Drenthe, whence he had come, he was greedy for more. He skimped the food of his animals. So much did he do this that his neighbors declared that they had seen him put green spectacles on his cows and the donkey. Then he mixed straws and shavings with the hay to make the animals think they were eating fresh grass. When he plowed, he drove his horses close to the fenland edge next to the water, so as to make use of every half-inch of land. When sometimes bits of fenland from his neighbors' farms got loose and floated on the water, Rijer felt he was in luck. He would go out at night, grapple the boggy stuff, and fasten it to his own land. After this had happened several times, and Rijer had added a half-acre to his holdings, his greed possessed him. Whenever he saw or heard of a floating bit of territory, he rowed his boat after it by night. Before morning, he would have the bog attached to his own farm. All this time, he hardly realized that his ill-gotten property, now increased to 12 acres or more, was itself a very shaky bit of real estate. About this time, heavy rains fell for many days and without ceasing until all the region was reduced to pulp and the country seemed afloat. The dikes appeared ready to burst. By the way, diking and pumping is creating a dam by moving water from one location to another. Yet none of the impending trouble worried Rijer, whose greed grew by what it fed upon. In fact, the first day the sun shone again, quickly drying up parts of his farm. He had 2 horses harnessed up for work. Then he drove them so near the edge of the ditch that plow, man, and horses tumbled, and down they went into the shiny mess of mud and water. At this moment also, the water from below the bottom of the Zuiderzee welled up in a great wave, like a mushroom, and the whole of Rijer's soggy estate was on the point of breaking loose and seemed ready to float away. The stingy fellow, as he fell overboard, bumped his head so hard on a plow beam that he lay senseless for a half-hour. Pete, his stout son, who was not far away and had seen the tumble, ran to the house, launched a boat, and rowed quickly to the spot where he had last seen his father. Grabbing his father by the collar, he hauled him into the boat. All this, however, took a long time, even an hour or more. When his father was able to sit up and talk, Pete started to row back to the little wharf in front of his home. But where was it? The farm with the house and fields. Whither had they gone? Rijer was too mystified to get his bearings, but Pete knew the points of the compass. Yet his father's farm was not there. He looked at the shore of the Overijssel, which he had left. It looked as if a giant, as big as the world itself, had bitten out a piece of land and swallowed it down. Dumbfounded, father and son looked, the one at the other, but said nothing, for there was nothing to say. Meanwhile, what had become of the mother with the children? These good people soon saw that they were floating off somewhere. The mainland was every moment receding farther into the distance. In fact, the farm was moving from Overijssel northward toward Friesland. One by one, the church spires of the village nearby faded from sight. But when the wind changed from south to west, they seemed as if on a ship with sails set and to be making due west for North Holland. The younger children, so far from being afraid, clapped their hands in glee. They thought it great fun to ferry across the big water which they had so long seen before their eyes. As for the floating farm, the cows could not understand it. They mooed piteously while the donkey brayed loudly. At night and day after day, no one could attend properly to the animals to see that they were fed and given water. One always sees a big tub in the middle of a Dutch pasture field. Neither ducks nor geese nor chickens minded it in the least, but the thirsty cattle and the horses, at the end of the first day, had drunk the tub dry. Occasionally, this errant farm that had thus broken loose passed by fishermen who wondered at so much land thus adrift. Yet they feared to hail and go on board, lest the owners might think them intruding. Others thought it none of their business, supposing some fellow was using his farm as a ship to move his lands, goods, and household, and thus save expense. In some of the villages, the runaway farm was descried from the tops of the church towers. Then it furnished a subject for chat and gossip during 3 days to the women as they milked the cows or knitted stockings. To the men also, while they drank their coffee, it was a lively topic. There were real people on it in a house and stables, said the sexton, an official of the church of a church. At last, after several days, when Ryer and his son were nearly finished with fatigue and fright and trying to row their boat to catch up with the runaway farm, they finally reached a village across the Zuiderzee in North Holland, where rye bread and turnips satisfied their hunger, and they had waffles for dessert. Their small change went quickly, and then the two men were at their wits' end to know what further to do. Happily, however, in drifting within sight of the village of Oosterbeek, the mother and the children noticed the east wind was freshening. Soon they descried the tops of the church towers of North Holland. The smell of cows and cheese and of burning peat fires from the chimneys made both animals and human beings happy as the wind blew the island westward to the village. Curiously enough, this was the very place at which, by hard rowing, Ryer and Pete had also arrived. Father and son were sitting in the hotel parlor with their eyes down on the sandy floor, wondering how they were to pay for their next sandwich and coffee, for their money was all gone. At that moment, a small boy clattered over the bricks in his klomps shoes. Half out of breath, he announced the coming afloat of what looked like a combination of farm and menagerie. A house, a woman, some girls, a dog, a cat, and a stork were on it and afloat. At once Ryer, still stiff from his long cold bath, hobbled out, and Pete ran before him. Yes, it was Mother, the children, and all the animals. A whole convoy of boats, fishermen, and farmers volunteered to go out and tow the runaway farm to the village wharf. They succeeded in grappling the float and held it fast by ropes tied to a horse post. As for Van Boomjesses, in order to save a landlord's bill for beds, they slept in their house on board the farm. Suddenly, and as straight as it steered by a skilled pilot, the Van Boopsjes' farm, now an accomplished traveler after its many adventures, shot into its old place. This took place with such violence that Ryer Van Boomsjes and his wife were both thrown out of bed. The cows were knocked over in the stable, the dog barked, one old rooster jostled off his perch, set up a tremendous crowing that brought some of the early risers out to rub their eyes and see what was going on. In fact, the Van Boopsjes real estate was snugly fitted once more to the mainland and again in the niche it had left. It had struck so hard that a ridge of raised sod 5 inches high marked the place of junction. From that day forth, the conscience of Van Boomsjes returned, and he actually became an honest man. He sawed off from time to time portions of his big farm and returned them home with money paid as interest to the owners. On the farm, all the animals, from duck to stork and from dog to ox, now led happier lives. In the family, all declared that the behavior of the farm and the wind of the Zuiderzee had combined to make a new man and a delightful father of Ryer van Boobjes.